Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a completely mind-bending look into the hidden machinery of the global financial system. We usually picture the stock market as this cold, highly rational machine, driven purely by objective data and intrinsic value. But what if I told you that is completely backwards? The market is not a calculator. It's actually a massive, highly volatile weather pattern. It's a thermodynamic system governed by the absolute, unforgiving laws of physics, and it is entirely driven by the collective irrationality of billions of sentient particles. And yes, those particles are us.
To understand how this systemic chaos actually functions, we've broken this down into 4 distinct laws of financial physics. First up, we'll look at the thermodynamics of market sentiment. Second, the invisible world of algorithms and digital Brownian motion. Third, how echo chambers create dangerous fat tails. And finally, how you can use all of this physics to build an anti-fragile portfolio. That's our roadmap for decoding the madness, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into Chapter 1, the thermodynamics of market sentiment.
We really need to stop looking at the market as just a collection of isolated numbers on a screen and start viewing it as a massive atmospheric phenomenon. Imagine looking at a sprawling weather radar, tracking a chaotic storm made entirely of human cognitive biases. So you gotta ask yourself, if the market is just this chaotic storm, why does it periodically completely decouple from tangible economic reality? Why do we see violent crashes even when the underlying fundamentals look incredibly strong? Well, the answer isn't actually found in the assets themselves. It lies in the physics of information propagation. It's all about how irrationality amplifies and spreads through networked feedback loops.
Classical economics loves to sell us this elegant mathematical fiction. You know the one, the idea that we're all just rational agents making perfectly optimal decisions. Which honestly is hilarious if you've ever spent 5 minutes watching day traders on Reddit. But financial epistemology, which is basically the study of how we believe what we believe, shows us the raw truth. We are entirely driven by heuristics, mental shortcuts, and pure neurochemical FOMO. Think of an equity bubble like a bone-dry forest right in the middle of a drought. A single spark, like a tiny unexpected price movement, doesn't just burn one tree. It immediately changes the ambient temperature of the entire atmosphere, making the air itself instantly combustible. And this rising temperature triggers a completely mind-blowing statistical mechanic known as stochastic resonance. As the market's temperature or its sentiment starts to rise, the noise in the system actually begins to power the signal. It forces a critical phase transition. Just like solid ice melting into liquid water, the market reaches a literal boiling point. It ceases to be a collection of individual independent actors, and it melts into a singular boiling fluid. Logic is just vaporized. Every single drop moves in tandem because the energetic state of the system simply no longer permits independent movement. Let's actually trace the exact steps of this contagion. When volatility spikes, the signal-to-noise ratio completely collapses, and what happens next? People stop looking at the actual data and they start looking at each other. It's exactly like being stuck in a crowded, pitch-black theater. Instead of calmly looking for the illuminated exit signs, everyone just looks at the people immediately around them. If one person starts sprinting in a panic, the whole room stampedes. And it doesn't matter if there's a fire or not. The collective movement itself becomes the absolute truth. And here's the kicker. The market physically remembers this panic. In the world of nonlinear dynamics, this concept is called hysteresis. Think of the market like a giant continent-sized sheet of memory foam. If you violently slam your hand into it, that deep impression remains for a very long time, and it physically works how that surface is going to react to the very next touch. What you absolutely need to take away from this is that the market does not cleanly reset at the opening bell. It remains physically deformed by the emotional weight of yesterday's chaos.
All right, moving into Chapter 2, algorithms and digital Brownian motion. So, if human emotion is the heat of this system, high-frequency algorithmic trading is what has fundamentally altered the physical viscosity of our financial medium. This erratic, entirely invisible movement is what we call digital Brownian motion. Think back to high school physics. Brownian motion is the erratic jiggling of microscopic particles as they get struck by invisible molecules. Well, in our modern financial fluid, high-frequency trading algorithms are those invisible molecules. They are relentlessly jostling the price of assets literally in microseconds, purely based on invisible microfluctuations. But here is the truly terrifying realities of this setup. These algorithms create what's known as synthetic liquidity. Now, on the surface, it looks like a deep, incredibly safe pool of water. But the absolute second a real shock hits the system, that algorithmic liquidity evaporates in a microsecond. It creates a sudden, violent vacuum that triggers a catastrophic flash crash. We have essentially built this highly sensitive, hyper-fast nervous system for our global economy, but we completely forgot to give it a central cortex. It behaves exactly like a highly nervous person standing in a pitch-black room. Every single shadow, every minor, meaningless data point is interpreted as a deadly monster, causing an instant, massive overreaction.
And this constant overreaction leads straight into the amplification of the trivial. Imagine taking a microphone and just slowly moving it closer and closer to its own speaker. What happens? You start with a low hum, right? Then it builds and builds until you get this deafening, ear-piercing feedback screech. That algorithmic screech completely drowns out the actual music of genuine economic production. It just creates pure, highly destructive noise.
This brings us to Chapter 3, Echo Chambers and Fat Tails. Now, as we enter this third phase, things get substantially more dangerous. Because while algorithms are out there amplifying the trivial, human beings are retreating into these highly segregated financial echo chambers. We're witnessing massive epistemic closure. Through social media algorithms and hyper-specialized news feeds, communities essentially build a reality distortion field right around themselves. In physics, we'd liken this to acoustic impedance matching. The community only absorbs frequencies or opinions that perfectly match their internal structure. Any counter-evidence, it literally just bounces off. It's reflected away as mere noise. It gets so utterly absurd that these communities will look at disastrously bad news and bizarrely interpret it as just another buying opportunity. It's wild.
And this distortion is fatal, largely because we've all been taught to look at risk completely wrong. Traditional models teach us to look at market risk through a standard Gaussian bell curve. But a bell curve only works for things like, say, the height of people in a room, where extreme outliers are basically physically impossible. You're not going to find someone 1,000 feet tall. Markets, however, operate on a fat-tailed distribution. That is more like the wealth of people in a room, where one person can literally be billions of times richer than the rest of the group combined. In a fat-tailed world, catastrophic extreme events aren't just possible, they are mathematically inevitable. When we mistakenly apply safe, predictable bell curve logic to a highly chaotic global market, we're doing something incredibly reckless. It's exactly like walking across a frozen lake while confidently betting that the ice is 5 feet thick everywhere, when in reality, the thickness varies wildly and dangerously from step to step. One wrong step, and the entire system simply falls through the ice. And when that ice does break, the physics of contagion takes over completely. You see, global balance sheets are deeply, inextricably interconnected. When one single node fails, the ripple effect doesn't just spread, it actually gains kinetic energy as it travels. Picture a long line of dominoes, but with a terrifying twist. Every single domino in this line is twice the size of the one that fell right before it. A tiny, seemingly insignificant collapse at one end eventually gathers enough energy to knock over a massive skyscraper of debt at the other end, and it does it moving at the literal speed of fiber optic light. Which leads us to our final section, Chapter 4, Building an Anti-Fragile Portfolio. So, the big question, how do we actually survive this? First, we have to completely pivot away from the outdated fiction of equilibrium economics and fully embrace complexity economics. We have to learn how to navigate the storm itself. The secret here is monitoring the system for critical slowing down. In physics, as any system nears a massive tipping point, it loses its ability to recover from minor perturbations. It takes longer and longer to bounce back from small dips. It is the architectural equivalent of noticing microscopic spiderweb cracks forming deep in a bridge's foundation. The bridge hasn't collapsed yet, but its structural integrity is quietly screaming that it can no longer sustain the load.
A really crucial part of understanding this is reflexivity. When we invest, we aren't just passively observing the market, we actively alter it. In biology, they call this niche construction. By pouring our money into a specific sector simply because we expect growth, we physically create that growth, fundamentally changing the landscape itself in the process. Why does this matter to you? Because objective fair value is a total illusion. The target constantly, inevitably moves the exact moment we take aim at it. And yet, institutional mechanics are constantly trying to fight this natural physics. When central systems, like central banks, frequently step in to artificially stabilize failing mechanisms, they introduce massive institutional moral hazard. From a purely analytical standpoint, what they're doing is stripping away the natural friction that is absolutely required for market health. Look, friction is uncomfortable, for sure, but it is a necessary force for systemic control. Stabilizing a system in this artificial way is like literally ripping the brakes off a speeding car just to maintain its momentum. It guarantees that the eventual correction will be far, far more extreme because you're actively training the particles of the market to completely ignore all risk.
So this reality requires a completely new approach: anti-fragile asset allocation. This isn't just about building a sturdy wall to resist the storm, it is about building a windmill to capture its incredible energy. You want to construct a portfolio that doesn't just survive, but actually thrives on market chaos. By intentionally holding uncorrelated assets, you become like the mythical Hydra. For every single head the market chops off, you grow two more. You position yourself to capitalize on the inevitable collapse of those massive feedback loops we just spent the last few minutes exploring.
Because here is the undeniable truth. The global market will always be a path-dependent, runaway process. It is an irrational, boiling ocean. You cannot control the temperature, and you certainly cannot command the tide. So the ultimate question you have to ask yourself right now is this: are you going to keep drowning while fruitlessly trying to stop the waves? Or are you going to build a vessel that turns this incredible, terrifying physics into pure kinetic energy?